So with the Big 12, there's a lot of interesting things here. They don't have a conference championship game or any two divisions or anything. It's just there's 12 teams, I think, right? Yeah, there have to be. There's 12. Big 12. For there's only 10 teams actually in the Big 12, and Oklahoma and TCU, Oklahoma State and Baylor are really the only four teams to watch out of these schools. They're the high flying offenses with great or with moderately good defenses, and they're going to win about every year. Oklahoma always wins and loses one big game. This year they lost two. But that's for in a few moments. TCU is going to be interesting. They lost Trevon Boykin, but they're bringing in some other freshman. I can't think of what his name is. It's a transfer. Oklahoma State's pretty good. Baylor's really good. I think Texas Tech's going to be an interesting one to watch. So, and then they got Texas, Kansas State, Iowa State, and then Kansas, who's 0-12, and I don't really see them reviving their program anytime soon. So, I think Texas. I'm going to just touch on the last couple guys here. Texas is really interesting to see if they give what they do in Charlie Strong's third year. He's a good coach. He turned around Louisville, and I think he's on the right track with Texas. He just needs a good quarterback and a good defensive players. I think he's getting a new quarterback this year as a freshman coming in dual threat, kind of more of his guy, and that'll be good for him. Kansas State, I don't think they're really good. I mean, they're good. Obviously, they went 6-7, but they're not really gonna win anything anytime soon. They win the games they should, but then they kind of compete in some of them, but they don't have enough star power to kind of beat the Baylors and TCU's and Oklahoma States and all that. And then lastly, we got West Virginia. Well, I should touch on Iowa State for a second. Iowa State is usually a basketball school more than a football school. They did win 3 games this year, so they can kind of compete, but they're not really going to be a top-tier school in the near future for the Big 12. West Virginia is kind of interesting. They went 8-5 this year, and they still have Holgerson, and obviously they won their bowl game. But what I was kind of thinking with that is they have one of the best offense. Well, running in the Big 12, you got to have a fast-paced, efficient offense, and their passer Howard, he had 532 yards and 5 TDs against Arizona State. I think they're kind of set for the future there. I think they got a good quarterback, good system in place. Holgerson's going to be staying there forever until he takes an NFL job or one of the SEC jobs if it's ever offered to him. So I think West Virginia's kind of going to be sitting in the mix at probably around 8-5, and maybe they'll get up to a 10-3 in a couple of years, but right around 500 the whole time. So I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Oklahoma, TCU, and Baylor more extensively, and I'm going to talk about Oklahoma State real quick. With Oklahoma State, they were kind of a overrated team, but not really insanely overrated. How the Big 12 works is they backlogged their schedule this year so that the Big Four, the Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State, kind of played all 4 of each other at the end of the year. And so I think that Oklahoma State could be good. They have the potential. They dropped 70 against Texas Tech and then almost 50 against TCU to knock off TCU's perfect season. And then they kind of shut down against Baylor. They only put up 35 against Baylor and 23 against Oklahoma, and then only 20 against Ole Miss. So I think that they have potential, but they need to unlock it completely. They need a couple more pieces probably. I'm not sure. I haven't really watched a lot of Oklahoma State games. Honestly, I don't really watch a lot of the Big 12. I watch outside of the Big 3 of Oklahoma, Texas, TCU, and Baylor. So I think they're going to be good for a couple of years. They got Mason Rudolph, and then they got some freshman that they started this year, or some kind of younger guy. I don't necessarily know if he's a freshman, but I think they're set for at least next year to make a kind of title run at the Big 12 if they move to the conference championship like they proposed, but I guess we'll see. So first school I'm going to talk about is, in fact, Baylor. And Baylor under their coach, Art Briles, they always find a way to have like some kind of offense to work with, and like their offense is always insanely good. Like they, I think they averaged like almost 50 points a game this year, and that's really good, especially if you're playing in the Big 12. But what really happened with Baylor is they lost their starting quarterback, and then they lost their second string quarterback, and then they lost their third string quarterback. So when he was in, Seth Russell looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, kind of thing. He looked like he pulled an RG3, and it's be interesting to see if he still plays as well next year when he comes in. But I don't think so as much. I guess we'll see. And then their second string quarterback, Jared Stidham, he he was playing really well too, just as good as Seth Russell was. I think it's more of a their system quarterback kind of thing. And they were all playing really good. And then he went down with an injury. He did get to play against Oklahoma, but they did lose that game 34-44. I don't remember which game he went down. It might have been the TCU game. Yes, it was. And they lost. So they lost him right before the TCU game. And then they tried to do a whole different approach. They tried to do running and then a little bit of passing with their third string of Johnson. And he didn't do a lot. And so they ended the season the regular season on a 2-game losing streak. They lost to TCU in double overtime, and then they lost to Texas, which was the most surprising loss. But it didn't really help that they went to their fourth string, Lawrence Hawthorne, and they still only got 64 yards out of him. So I think that after a while, the injuries catch up to you. So I think they're going to be good in the future. And they kind of figured it out against North Carolina, where they started rushing a lot more. They had Jefferson have almost 300 yards, Chaffin 150. That's like 450 yards of total offense right there. So I'm gonna be interested to see what they do next year with Stidham coming back, or the other quarterback, their starter the whole year, coming back in Seth Russell. So I think they're going to be a good offense, like always. They can hang with about anyone in the league offensively. So I think they're going to be one of the bigger teams to watch. I already talked about Oklahoma State. And so TCU is another team. They have Trevon Boykin. They dropped 70 in a game like every other team, it seems like. One thing that worries me is they almost lost to Kansas. They only won 23-17. Although Boykin was injured in that game. So I don't think he came back the whole season. They had a backup play against Oklahoma, and they almost beat Oklahoma. They only lost by 1. Of course, like I said, Boykin played against in the Baylor game. I don't think, he did play the whole game. Okay. So Boykin's one of the more interesting quarterbacks, I guess, because he's good, but he's never really uninjured. So he's going to be interesting in the NFL. I don't see him as I see him as more of an RG3 kind of build, but he could be good in the right system. So guess we'll see what happens there. And then they ended up on a 2-game winning streak after losing to Oklahoma, and they beat Oregon in the Alamo Bowl, which was a 3-overtime thriller, 47-41. I thought it was one of the best games I've ever seen. Honestly, I like that game because they made a huge comeback. I think it was like 41 points in the last quarter. So Gary Patterson knows what he's doing on offense, and I think his defense is coming around. Obviously, TCU is going to be in the mix every year like they always are, and they're going to be one of the top teams once again. I do not think they're national championship caliber, but I will talk about that in just a little bit. So moving on to Oklahoma. We have Oklahoma kind of beat up on everyone after a couple weeks. The only loss that they had that's kind of embarrassing to me is they lost to Texas 24-17. And like I said before, Texas isn't really a great team, but the Big 12 is kind of different because you can beat about anyone. So, and then their second loss, it was the semifinal against Clemson, and it's kind of really hard They had a good Baker Mayfield was really a good quarterback this year. He had 300 yards in that game, and he didn't really make mistakes at all. But they did lose in that game just because Watson's an exceptionally good quarterback, and they have Clemson has a stifling defense. So, like I said before, but I guess to finish up on Clemson here, they have a bright future ahead of them. They're going to win a lot of games. Oklahoma's going to win a lot of games. I think that they got the right quarterback in Mayfield. They got a couple guys coming in. They got Kyler Murray, I think, or maybe it's Kyle. One of the Texas A&M quarterbacks that transferred. They got both of them coming in, or one of them coming in. They did lose Trevor Knight to Texas A&M, which isn't really a big deal because they got Baker Mayfield and they got the new quarterback coming in too. So I don't really see them having much trouble in the future. They got a lot of playmakers with Sterling Shepard and their running back Ryno, and I can't think of the other one. But I think that they're set on offense. Their defense needs a little bit of work, but they're going to be good in the future, and they'll be top of the Big 12 and in the conference championship if they ever do it next year. So we're going to move on to